or it is here anyway. We are competing with Boris Johnson, of course, because our Prime Minister is doing a press conference at the same time. How inconsiderate, I say, but hopefully you'll be able to catch up with Boris later on to hear what he's got to say. Thanks for joining this webinar. As I say, this is the first in a series of webinars entitled Your School as a Business, Key Issues for 2021. And I'm delighted that we are being supported by Toucan Tech, by Independent School Management Plus, and by the Independent Schools Portal. And myself and my colleagues will be delivering these webinars over the next 4 weeks, and hopefully you'll be able to sign into as many as you can. You'll notice that on your side or top bar there is a chat box. If you've got any questions, please type the questions into the chat box and we will address those questions at the end. There'll be a short time. But of course, I'm very happy to pick up any conversations with you after that as well. You'll also receive in the next couple of days a link to the recording of the webinar if you want to pass that on to colleagues that couldn't make this time. So, as I said, income generation, thinking outside the box is the topic we'll be looking at today. A hello from me. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. My name's Rachel Hadley-Leonard. I won't read through all these bullet points, but the top bullets there are a sort of brief resume of my career to date. I've spent over 30 years involved in education, marketing and fundraising. And at the bottom there, that's the roles that I am currently undertaking. So I'm quite a busy lady. My main role, I work with schools, with development, admissions and marketing, mainly independent schools, but not exclusively independent schools. I work with some academy trusts and standalone schools as well. I'm also a judge for TES, a marketing judge for TES. I'm a judge for an American US company, organization, not-for-profit, inspired marketing. I'm a mentor, and I'm an independent school governor. So, as I say, quite a busy person, but I'm delighted to be here this afternoon and sharing some thoughts with you. And thank you for joining. So, who is this webinar for and what are we going to be looking at? Really, anybody who is involved in income generation for their school, whether you're a head, a bursar, director of finance, a governor, a development specialist, a marketing specialist. If you've got an interest in developing income in ways that are outside of fee income or government funding, then this is the webinar for you. We'll be looking at these bullet points here. So understanding your school as a business, the income generation mix, maximising your school's facilities, sweating your assets, stakeholder bond issues, expense reduction and other special and online projects. This webinar is only 30 minutes long, so it's really a very short look, a very brief touch on all of these points. But as I say, if you want to pick up these in any more depth at a later date, please do get in touch. My details will be at the end and I'm very happy to talk in more detail. So we have been in obviously unprecedented times over the last 6, 7, 8 months. And I think one of the positives that has come out of the COVID situation is that people are understanding schools as a business much more, and a little bit of that shortly. But what have the challenges been? Well, the challenges have been huge, and there have been whole school impacts of COVID. You will have heard the words, whether you're on the sort of distributing or the receiving end, you will have heard the words furlough, redundancy, cost reductions, job uncertainty. All of those words will be very familiar, I'm sure. And what started out as 8 independent school closures has gone up, I believe, to 30 schools giving notice to close or having closed. In state schools, also huge impacts. And I don't know of a teacher, a head teacher, a finance director that hasn't been working flat out for the last 6 months and over the summer. My hat's off to all people involved on a day-to-day basis in education, because it has been huge and the impact has been huge. But I do think the positives have been a better understanding of the school as a business, right the way across academic staff and support staff, because people have had to understand the way that schools operate and the impact that COVID has had on their schools. I think also there's a greater clarity of the fiscal operations of a school. That's not to say it was cloak and dagger before or smoke screens, but I do think that heads, governors, bursars, directors of finance have been pressed to share more the bottom line of their businesses with their staff. So I think academic and support staff have been working harder, they've been working together, and they want the longer term success of their schools. So not all doom and gloom. I think there have been some positives surrounding the last 7 months, particularly the greater understanding of the school as a business. I think resourcefulness is key here. And one of the things that I'll talk about as we go through this webinar is the importance of drawing on all your resources within your school community. And by school community, I'm referring to your academic staff, your support staff, your parents, your alumni, your former staff, your former pupils, your pupils, and the people living in the community around your school, because there's a lot of untapped resource there. And when you reach out to those people, I certainly, when I've been working with schools on income generation projects recently in the last 18 months, I've been surprised at the level of skill base within school communities and how much people, when asked, are prepared to contribute and step up and say, actually, I have this skill that could be useful here. I have these contacts that could be useful here. So I would say that resourcefulness is key, and really exploit the stakeholders that you have within your school and their skills. More of that a little bit later. So what is the income generation mix? Well, if you are a state school, it's your government funding. If you're an independent school, it's your fees. That perhaps gives between 75 and 90% of your school fee income, your school income, sorry. And the rest is perhaps made up if you're lucky enough to have a PTA, a PA, Parents Association, a development office that does fundraising. You may be an independent school that's very well established and has endowments, although those are few and far between now. And you might have access to grants and trusts, particularly if you're a state school. And all of those things will make up your income generation mix. But the one thing that we shouldn't forget about, and we shouldn't push to one side, is the school business income and what we can do to raise the school business income. And that's what we'll be looking at today. I think one of the most straightforward and easiest places to start is to maximise your school's facilities and lettings income. So if you have anything within your school that you could let out, use as a facility, a let, a hire, then that's a really good place to start and what you could be looking at. And how do we go about this? Well, I think in the same way as we want to gather a team for this whole income generation project, we want to do the same for facilities letting. So we need to rally a team. And by that, I mean not giving people a job to do and saying, this is your job to look at facilities lettings and increase it and broaden it and improve it. But to put some feelers out there to all your stakeholders that I've just been talking about and say, who has an interest in this? Who maybe has got commercial business acumen that could help us with this? You could set up a project team, a task force to be given the remit of looking into your facilities lettings. And the first thing to do then is to review the provision that you already have. So are there any facilities that you're letting out at the moment? Could they be expanded? Could they be broadened? Could they be widened? You then need to research the competition, and not just from schools, but from other organisations such as, for example, sports centres, wedding venue hires, restaurants, hotels, any organisation, including other schools, that offer the same facilities lettings that you're looking to do. You then need to sit down as a group and look at charges and hire facilities, and look at the offering, look at how your offering compares, and rewrite that offering in line with the research that you've done. And then sit back and reap the rewards. And I honestly think this is one of the areas where you can really make a very quick and instant impact. There are just some examples here from schools, and some of these schools are very big, household names, Repton, for example. But many schools now have an enterprises page to their website where you can go onto a menu and click the facility that you want to hire as a corporate or as an organisation or as a private person wanting perhaps to hire a venue for a party or for a conference. And you can go and click, and you can look at a whole suite of facilities that a school might have, and then you can go in and hire them just as you would in a corporate way. Another example here from Mill Hill School, which has got, as you might expect, some astonishing facilities. And then Bancroft Prep Schools, they have, and Bancroft Senior, they have an enterprises section, a commercial arm of Bancroft School. And there, it's a very straightforward and simple web page that they have, but it talks about the facilities that they can hire, including the swimming pool, the sports hall, the fitness suite, function rooms, performing arts centre. But even if you are just a small primary school with a hall, you will be surprised at the demand that there will be on that space. Venue space is expensive, and venue space needs to be local. And I think you'll be surprised at the demand that could be there, even for a hall, perhaps for a local group to play badminton in, or to have a reading group, to hold a reading group in. Obviously, we're living in slightly different times at the moment, but I do believe we will be back to situations where we can have more than 6 people meeting together. And indeed, sports teams are exempt from the latest legislation anyway. And just one more example from a school in Hong Kong, actually, because this isn't just applicable to UK schools. This is, I know we've got some people listening into this webinar internationally, and those schools as well, have facilities that can be hired out. If you go onto the Kellett website in Hong Kong, you will see some of the facilities they have to hire. So this can be an easy win. If you're doing research in your local area and you find that your hire charges actually are a little bit low, there might be room to do an uplift of 10% in your hire charges. If you brand and package your facilities as some of the schools that I've shown you, or even just have a page on your website, you can expect to get at least a 10% growth in hire uptake, particularly if your marketing of those facilities is good. Both of those things can be done in a matter of weeks, certainly within a month. And within a month, you can have a 20% income generation on what you were doing before, or if you weren't hiring out anything before from scratch, an uplift of 20%. So for example, if you're a big school and your existing annual lettings income is 100k, then you're going to produce an extra 20k pretty quickly. And that is one of the areas where there is an easy win. So what about other assets that we can sweat? Well, I think, again, a positive as COVID has been that, a bit like farmers 15, 20 years ago, they had to think outside the box. They had to think about other ways. So in the same way that farms started having yurts on their land to hire out, they started doing all sorts of different enterprises, such as urban farms that children could visit, and shops that distributed some of their product. Schools have been doing the same. And some of these ideas that you see there are hundreds of ideas, but holiday camps you may already do, but you may not do at Christmas. You may only do in the summer. So you might want to think about having holiday camps at Christmas or at Easter. You might want to register your school with a film location company to be used for filming. It could be a study centre, it could be a corporate training centre, a wedding venue. Sometimes small, simple things that are really quick wins, like there are popping up all over the place these drive-through cinemas, which have suddenly become popular in the times of COVID, car boot sales, sports camps, scout and guide camps, and conference centres. The list is endless, but if you can get a team of people together to do an income generation scoping project, this is what I've done with 3 schools now, and it has been fantastic to have a cross-section of people who have come up with some really, really good ideas that we can run with. So in a little bit more sort of straightforward format there, this is what happens when you think outside of the box. Some schools already operate as extra examination and revision centres, and what I mean by that is they welcome children, pupils, to come and sit exams that don't have a school to sit their exams at, and that can be a way to raise revenue. Likewise, a revision centre, a cramming centre, many schools are going down this route now. Corporate training venues, I've mentioned some of the other things, wedding locations, many UK sports teams, GB Sport, England Sport, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and teams around the world want training grounds to train at. And as the teams grow and we come up to the Commonwealth Games in particular, they will be looking for extra locations to train. And even if you have just got a playground with a netball court on, you would be surprised. Contact your local netball teams, contact your local England netball, for example, and see if they can make use of your space. Online remote learning opportunities, really big names here, EatNext and Fedra Online, and we'll talk about those shortly, but you don't have to have that household brand to be able to do online remote learning opportunities. The national tutoring programme that I was just talking to my colleague Simon about earlier on this call, that will start out, and there is a huge demand for online tutoring at the moment, and it might be that you can put your school's name to that. Catering add-ons, wraparound care. You may already have wraparound care before and after school clubs, but you may be able to market that much better, and you may be able to extend that provision. Although more and more people are now working from home as a result of COVID, people still need their children out of the way because their home is now their office. And actually, some schools are finding there is more demand for wraparound care. Nursery provision is something that you may want to look to pick up if you don't already do. Sadly, very sadly, some nurseries are folding as a result of the COVID situation, and actually there is an opportunity there for schools to pick up nursery provision. Obviously, these are things that aren't going to happen overnight. These are not quick wins. They are long-term gains rather than short-term. As is overseas licensing opportunities. If you're an independent school, that might be something that you have thought about and you could look to do. And there are companies that can guide you through that whole process. But like I say, they are not quick wins. Throughout that slide and the previous slide, some of those things can be set up in a matter of weeks, months. Some of those things will take much, much longer. But the exciting time is to get together a group of people who want to be involved in income generation and can just scope a few ideas and come up thinking outside of the box with some really different ideas. One of the things that I was fortunate to be involved with last year and earlier this year, which really was fantastic to follow, was stakeholder bond issues. Now, when King's Gloucester School, which is an independent day school for girls and boys, going from 3 to 18, when the school looked at doing this, I think there were only 2 other schools in the country, to our knowledge, that had sort of stepped into this world of sort of financial bond issues. And you'll know what a bond issue is, but basically it was a way to raise funds very quickly through stakeholder investment. And I'm just going to share a little bit more about what King's Gloucester did. It's not for every school, I have to say that from the start. This really is thinking outside the box. But if you've got a school that has the right demographic in terms of parent body or alumni body, you might find this could be something worth looking at. So King's Gloucester had a sixth form centre, beautiful listed building set within the cathedral grounds that they wanted to refurbish as a brand new sixth form centre. And they were confident that if they got people to invest, the increased numbers over the next 7 years would be such that they would be able to make a return on people's investment. So they were looking for around £2 million to do the refurbishment for the sixth form. They aimed to raise that figure within 9 to 12 months. They invited their whole school community to invest in the school, although I think really it was predominantly parents that were invited. They offered a fixed rate of return of 3%, which is about 3% more than you get at your local building society or bank at the moment. They aimed this, as I say, at current parents, but there were other groups that were able to be involved, such as corporates. As I said, it does only work with certain demographics, and the project needs to be enticing. And the school has to be certain of A, its longevity, and B, confident that the project will generate income to pay back the investors. And that little diagram there shows that for a £10,000 investment, with an annual interest of 3% paid over a 7-year term, the total was a £12,100 return on their investment. If you want to look a little bit more about what King's did, and particularly wanted to see what they're doing with their sixth form centre, which I am hopefully going to visit in the next 2 weeks, there's a link there for you to have a look at. But basically this slide shows what they did in a nutshell. They raised over £1.8 million in 6 months. Now, they were very fortunate to have one corporate investor that made £500,000 investment, and that was matched by a private investor, but that was from their school community. That was an individual from their school community. They had several donations, investments of 100,000, and many investments of between 10 and 20. And of course, one thing that I haven't mentioned is that there's always the chance, of course, that these people will decide at the end of the process that they don't actually want their money back and they're going to leave it invested as a donation into the school. Who knows? But something not for everybody, but something maybe to look at if you feel your school would fit that. Expense reduction is kind of the opposite of income generation, but I think it's something that all corporates do and schools have historically not been so good at. So what is expense reduction? Well, it's where you look at all the things you spend money on that are non-staff costs. So for many schools, that will be between sort of 10 and 30% that are non-staff costs. Things like your utilities bill, heating, lighting, etc., photocopying, your services contract, for example, window cleaning, tech providers, your internet and Wi-Fi service providers, your stationery that you purchase, all of those things that your school spends money on that are not staff costs. And you can ask ERAs, expense reduction analysts, to come in and, well, you can do it yourself for a start, but you might want to get a specialist to come in. They usually work on a sort of commission basis where they take a cut of the savings that they make for you. And they would say that their non-staff expenditures are typically 30% of the total school costs, but it can be anything from between 10% to 30%. And expense reduction analysts will look to review about half of those costs that you spend. And they reckon that there's a potential to save 3% of your total overheads. So let's just say you're a very large school with a £10 million spend. then there's a potential saving there of around £300,000, which is not to be sniffed at. But even if you scale that back to £1 million spend, then you've still got 30,000 saving. So the opposite of income generation, but I still think something worth looking at. We've then got special and online projects, and we talked about online summer schools, and I know that Eton have an Next programme, Sedbergh have an online summer school, but that's not just for these big brand names. But if you want to have a look at those websites, go along, have a look at them, and just see the kind of thing they're offering, and maybe you can do something on a scaled down or a similar version. And I just want to end with some ideas and examples here from a few schools. These were kindly provided by schools, Chukin Tech, who work with schools with their database software for fundraising. But you might have a business directory. I know that lots of schools have an alumni business directory and they don't charge. And I think that's probably a very good thing. But some schools do charge for their alumni businesses to advertise with them, or perhaps if they don't charge, they have a sort of highlighted opportunity where alumni businesses or parent businesses can pay a little bit more to have their business highlighted. You might have a sponsored email where you can send a dedicated e-shop for a company, or inserts or adverts within your newsletters, for example. Bishop Beatty Grammar School in Birmingham, they have a corporate sponsorship programme which brings in approximately £2,000 a year per sponsor. Have a look at their website if you want to learn more about that. Campbell College, they have corporate sponsors which help fund the running costs of their Old Campbellian Society. So perhaps if you haven't got a development office up and running and you're thinking about doing that, then maybe you can look at corporate sponsors helping to fund that. It's all a different way to generate income for your school. I really like this idea. Bradfield College, they have a beautiful aerial print of their school, and £75 of that goes towards their bursary fund. A great way for income to be generated and going back into the school society. Lots of schools do art auctions. They do art auctions with their students' work, with their alumni work, with anyone in their stakeholder community who is an artist. But since COVID, many schools have been taking their art auctions online, with the proceeds going to the school. And I would recommend, if you can do that, do. It's a really good way to generate funds. So that's it really, thinking outside the box. Top tips to generate income for your school: involve the whole school community. Don't exclude anyone. Put the scoping project out there and get a small group together, or a large group, and get them coming up with ideas that work particularly well with your school community. Create a task force that's got passion and that's got skill, that has a skill set that will really help you. Set deadlines for your scoping project. A scoping project really shouldn't take much more than 3 or 4 months, and then you can get started with some of the quick wins. Be innovative and do think out of the box, but stay realistic. You know, if someone comes up with a really wacky idea that you just don't think is going to work, you're going to have to be realistic and say, great idea, but no. Create a roadmap. Sometimes the quick wins can fund some of the projects that require a bit more of an investment, and you might need people to, you might need the quick win projects to fund those longer term projects. It's also something that you might want to think about is, if you have the funds to do it, to employ someone. Usually schools who have the really big enterprises, they employ someone whose job it is to oversee this, but they will be self-funding within a year. So that's not a cost that you particularly need to worry about. And as I say, begin with the quick wins. So thank you for listening. We've got a few minutes left for some questions. Hopefully there will be some questions. My co-presenter Simon Hepburn, he is going to ask us any questions, so do stay on the line to hear your question. What I would say just quickly as well is that if you have any questions that you think of after this webinar, or if there's anything that you want to speak to me directly about, to know more about, please do give me a call, drop me an email, go over to my website where there's a contact form as well. We will be sending out the recordings in the next day or two with some email links as well. So as I say, if you only caught some of this webinar or your colleagues have missed it, then you will be receiving that. So Simon, do we have any questions? I think we do.
Yeah, I do. Hello, everybody. So the first question from Julie here, it says, it's hard to see how lettings will work within the COVID restrictions. Any thoughts on how that might work?
That is a very good question, Julie, and it's one that sort of, I alluded to it earlier on. It's one that's at the forefront of everyone's mind. However, there are organisations, as I say, all sporting organisations are exempt from these latest restrictions. That's my understanding anyway. I've got that on good authority from a sporting club. And so certainly as far as sport is concerned, I think you'll find that that is still a possibility. And clubs are still wanting to train, clubs are still wanting to practice. And also there are clubs and societies that have groups that are much, much smaller, so that would fit into the current restrictions of 6 people. So, but the other thing that I would say is this is the time, you know, God forbid this lasts forever, and I think this is a great time to be doing your income generation scoping project and getting the back end work done in the boiler room, setting up the page on your website, etc., so you can hit the ground running. So yeah, I hope that's answered your question, Julie.
Okay. Next question, which goes back to again, something you said before. How do you involve the wider school community in these initiatives? How do you get them involved?
I think the best way to do that is by letting people know what it is you're trying to do. So you are telling people that we're going to, you know, the school is a business. It has to be financially viable. We are going to run an income generation scoping project, give people a few ideas about the type of thing you'll be looking for, and then throw it open to your parent community to get involved and your alumni community or your former staff or staff community to get involved. Tell people what you're going to be doing, make it easy for them to attend a first meeting, give them some choices, give them an agenda, say that they're not going to be expected to run the whole thing, but they will just need to sort of turn up with some fantastic ideas. People like to be involved when they're asked, so I think asking them, yeah, you're always going to have people putting their hand up and saying, actually, do you know what, I think I could help here. There's a lot of business acumen out there with people with skills.
Cool. And one final question. How long should the scoping project take?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, the scoping project, which is where, this is what I've been doing with a few schools, which is where we look at what is feasible for the school. We look at what facilities they've got. We look at what online provision they've got. We look at out of the box ideas, and we come up with a project document. The last one that I've done is sort of 40 pages long. That whole process can take anything from between sort of 2 and 6 months. I wouldn't expect it to go on longer than 6 months, and you can do it in 2 or 3. And then, of course, you also produce your roadmap that says which are the easy wins that you start with and which are the things that will take much longer, and they're going to be built into your school development plan and your financial planning as well. Yeah, hope that answers that question. As I say, if you've got any more questions that you want to ask me, please do get in touch at the email address there or the telephone number. Just a reminder that there are a series of talks. This is the first of 4 running throughout September. We may continue after that. The next talk is on recruitment and employer branding by Simon, who's on the line at the moment. Julie will be talking about school challenges specific to prep schools. that actually isn't on a Wednesday, that's Tuesday the 22nd of September. And then back to a Wednesday, Adam from Jones Millbelt, we were talking about content creation. And when we send you the email in the next couple of days with the link to this recording, there'll be an opportunity there to sign up to those webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us online. I know it's an exceptionally busy time of the year, far busier than it would normally ever be. So really appreciate your time. I hope you've been able to come away with at least just one thing that you think, do you know what, that could work for my school. But thank you very much, and it's been great to have you online. Thank you.